Sup guys, it's Telis here, and welcome back to Arcurus for the final time, and welcome to the absolute final class overview set of videos. We are here to take a look at Blood Death Knight. This is the very last spec to cover in terms of all of the specs that you can play in World of Warcraft Legion. We have gone through all the tanks, all the healers, all DPS, all that is remaining is the Blood Death Knight, and so we're going to go through it in this 2-video series just like we have for every other class specialization. To be honest, I'm quite excited to be finished with this video because it has been a long, exhausting month and a half trying to churn these out as quickly as possible so that you guys can get info before the pre-patch, which is only a couple of weeks away, if even that. It's probably about 10 days away. Probably by the time I get this video uploaded, it will only be a week away until pre-patch. So we are so close to the beginning of Legion, and I wanted to make sure to get all of these videos out to you before that happened. So, just like all the other videos that you've seen on here, if you've taken a look at any of the others, we will, in this first video, look at the changed, removed, and new abilities for a a Blood Death Knight coming in Legion, and we will also look at the artifact weapon. You can see it right here. It's kind of okay for an artifact weapon. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely not one of the worst. So that is the artifact weapon. We'll be looking at abilities and the artifact weapon in this video. And then in the second video, we'll be taking a look at the PvE and PvP talents that are available to a Blood Death Knight in World of Warcraft Legion. With that being said, before we get into the big changes, or the changed, removed, and new abilities for Blood Death Knight, I would like to go over kind of some big changes to Blood Death Knight, and as I have with the tanking videos that we've done recently, kind of tell you where Blizzard is going in terms of the theme of the tanking spec here. So, first off, major changes you should know about Blood Death Knight is that, as with the other Death Knights, basically your runes now, you just have runes as a resource now, instead of there being blood runes, frost runes, unholy runes. You now just have your regular just runes, okay? No death runes, nothing like that. Blood Death Knight was really the only Death Knight, I believe, that still operated with the 3 tiers of runes, whereas Frost and Unholy had kind of dropped to 2, with Death kind of counting as both. So now it's just all runes, so any ability that costs any amount of runes, just if it costs 1 Unholy, 1 Frost, it now costs 2 runes. That's all you need to know now, is that that is basically the major changes, that it just costs like, how many runes it took before, it'll cost the same. It's runes now instead of different types of runes. With that being said, all of the different tanks in the game, as I've mentioned in the recent tanking videos, have been kind of given more of a concrete theme to go with their spec, to kind of separate them from other tanks, to kind of give them their own identity. It's very similar to how, like, an identity of a Resto Druid is so much different from the identity of a Holy Paladin. They're very different in their healing identities, and they've tried to do the same for tanks. So we've gone through Guardian Druids, which is all about having the big, massive health pool that no one else can match, and then mitigating damage to that health pool. We have a Vengeance Demon Hunter that's all about basically soul reaping and taking lesser soul fragments and restoring your health while dealing damage to the target, and with a little bit of parry tossed in there for some defensive capabilities. We have Protection Warriors, which is all about your shield and using your shield to block. It's your typical sword and board tank. You have your shield, shield wall, shield block, everything is there. Deals with the shield and how to enhance the shield in its protection. You have Protection Paladins, which are all about, it's got kind of a little bit of elements from many of these different specs, but its main element is using the Holy Light as an amplifier for your defensive measures. That's basically the entire basis of a Protection Paladin. Also, in addition to that, it's based on cooldowns, whereas other specs may be a little bit different. It is really the only tanking spec that has multiple defensive cooldowns, and you will have to kind of time them based on what you need for the situation. So, Protection Paladins are all about holy amplification of their defensive capabilities and cooldowns. And then lastly, in the most recent video, we talked about Brewmasters and how they are all about the dodge and the stagger and drinking brews to enhance your dodging and your ability to stagger and shrug off damage. Well, now we get to Blood Death Knights, and Blood Death Knights are all about the magical shielding. So you have the shields with both a Holy Paladin, sorry, not a Holy Paladin, Protection Paladin and Protection Warrior. Those are the actual physical shields. This is more about magical shields, your blood shields, your bone shields, and then on top of that also getting some life steal, or not really life steal, but really some life return based off of your death strike, which should be very familiar to all Blood Death Knight tanks out there. So, with that, let's go ahead and look at the removed abilities for Blood Death Knights. There are a ton. In fact, I think they set a record for the most abilities removed, but do not worry, I do believe Blood Death Knights are in an awesome position for tanking in World of Warcraft Legion. And in case you haven't been paying attention to the other videos in terms of what I think will be a good tank, what will not be a good tank, and what in the world was going on right there. There was it looks like a paladin here that was actually being attacked by all the guards. That's actually really hilarious. Anyways, if you haven't been keeping up with the different videos, basically the Blood Death Knight falls into the mid-range, kind of with Brewmasters, in terms of their ability to AoE tank. I think Guardian Druids, it's going to be about on the same level as a Guardian Druid, I'd say. I think that's pretty fair. Maybe a little bit above, but I think Protection Paladins will probably be the #1 AoE tank, and then from there it'll go Blood DK, Guardian Druid, Brewmaster Monk probably, and then Vengeance Demon Hunter, and then finally Protection Warrior I think is by far the worst in terms of AoE tanking. That being said, let's go ahead and look at removed abilities. First, Army of the Undead, or Army of the Dead, has been removed. It is now Unholy. Unholy is all about raising dead minions around you, so it has been, put into a specific Unholy role. You do not have access to it. Blood Presence, Frost Presence, and Unholy Presence all have been removed. Basically, any type of stance dancing, stance switching has been taken out of the game. It is no longer available. The only stance switching in the game now is basically with Druids, which makes sense because they're shape-shifting between different forms. And then also, just because it's so iconic, they gave it back to Arms Warriors as a talent, if you would like to take it, just to get that stance switching back. But for the most part, chakras, stances, presences, you name it, they've all been removed from the game. That being said, Bone Shield has been removed. It's been melded into a new ability. So we'll get to that when we get to the new abilities, but Bone Shield as an actual activating ability that you activate is gone. It's folded into something else, so it's a little bit different. Chains of Ice has been removed. For the most part, I believe that is just stuck with Frost only. I will double check right here, make sure that Unholy doesn't have it. I'm pretty sure. Yes, Chains of Ice, they do have Chains of Ice. So Unholy has Chains of Ice, Blood does not. They have lost Chains of Ice. That's something that you're going to have to pay attention to in PvP specifically. Dark Simulacrum, if I pronounce that correctly. I know each Death Knight video I've had trouble pronouncing that. It is a PvP talent, so we still have that, but you're going to have to actually spec into it for PvP. Death Coil has been removed. It is Unholy only now. It is not available to Blood Death Knights. They've done a lot of diversifying of the tanking specs, the Death Knight specs across the board, making them all individualized. So, basically a casualty of that is losing Death Coil as a Blood DK, or Death Coil. Empower Rune Weapon is Frost only. That has been taken out. Horn of Winter is also now taken out as a Frost talent, only available to Frost DKs. Icebound Fortitude, which was a defensive cooldown, basically now is only Frost as well. Just as I kind of went through with Protection Paladins, basically the amount of cooldowns that a tank has been reduced significantly. You're going to have like a big cooldown that you can use, maybe a small cooldown, but for the most part, you're going to have to really pay attention to when you use your cooldowns. The exception being a protection paladin, which is all about the cooldowns and so forth. So, just something to note there. Icy Touch has been removed, and with that I'll say Plague Strike and Outbreak have been removed. There's a new way of applying your one disease now to the target. For the most part, unless you're unholy, you basically only have one disease. Frost Fever now has become basically a frost-only disease. And then Blood Plague has become a blood-only disease. And then the good old Unholy, which is all about diseases, got brand new diseases to complement the fact that it is the disease spec. So, Blood Plague is still there, it's just applied in a different way. So, Plague Strike, Icy Touch, Outbreak, all gone. Rune Tap can still be acquired, however, it is a talent. It has been removed. Strangulate, same as well. It has been removed. You can get it back as a PvP talent, though. Dark Sucker, I believe I pronounced that correctly. I think I looked it up for one of the older videos to make sure that I got it right. Who knows if it's right this time around, because it's been a while since I've done a Death Knight video. That has been removed from the game. Power of the Grave has been removed. We're starting to get into these passives here that have been removed. Resolve has been removed from all tanks. That used to be the tanking solution that Blizzard implemented. Now it is basically gone. Veteran of the Third War is gone. Its name lives on, however it's completely different, so I decided to just say that Veteran of the Third War is gone. It did a lot of things, like I think there was like a little bit of dodge chance or parry chance in there, and all kinds of different things, stuff dealing with multi-strike, all kinds of stuff. They basically just stripped the whole thing clean. They're like, we like this name, we're going to bring it back, and we'll use it for something else. So we'll look at that when we get to the new abilities. Will of the Necropolis, Necropolis, however you would like to pronounce it, is gone. Soul Reaper is gone. It is an unholy talent. And then lastly, Runic Strikes is gone, which was a passive, I think, secondary stat buff. So basically, Blood DK has lost a lot in terms of abilities. I think I counted it as 23 overall, how many they've lost. But when you think about it, you lost 3 of those are presences, okay, which they baked into your basic damage overview. 3 of those are basically diseased applications, which you're not going to be using as a function anymore, so that is gone. So a lot of this, and then a good chunk of them are passives, so for the most part, I don't worry if there's a lot of pruning on your class, because it's replaced by new abilities, it's replaced by a talent tree that's pretty much completely brand new. I mean, just a tease here of the second video, take a look at this PvE talent tree, and you'll have trouble finding a lot of the stuff you're accustomed to. A lot of it is just gone. It's been removed. So, it's now gone. But, so do not worry about the pruning. Overall, Blood Death Knights are still going to be in a great spot. Thankfully, that's the last time I'm going to have to say that, but basically, pruning is way over-exaggerated by the World of Warcraft community on how much has happened and how much it'll be a detriment to you. Do not worry, it's in pretty good shape. With that being said, let's go ahead and look at the changed abilities for a Blood Death Knight. The first being Anti-Magic Shell, and I do believe I may have missed this in the other videos, but Anti-Magic Shell, I did mention its cooldown has been increased from 45 seconds to 1 minute. However, what I did miss, I believe, is that it used to absorb just 100% of magic damage, you know, straight up. It would, you know, 100% magic damage, it would absorb through all of it for 5 seconds. At least that's what the tooltip indicated when I was comparing these two. Now it actually has a set amount that it will absorb. So using Anti-Magic Shell, basically you're going to absorb up to 850,000 damage, and then it goes away. And then this damage absorbed still generates runic power. But cooldown increased from 45 seconds to 1 minute. Blood Boil. So a big change here. And this is something they've been doing across the board, and this is why I mentioned, you know, the AoE capabilities of the different specs earlier, and this is because they've really cut down on how easy it is to get AoE threat. They want it to be more of a challenge. Prop Paladins, I think, are easily going to be the best. But on top of that, these other specs have kind of had a cutback on how, you know, how you're able to do it. Now, Blood Boil no longer costs a rune. So that was what limited it before. You could use Blood Boil as much as possible as long as you had the runes for it. That's no longer going to be the case. It now has a 7.32 second cooldown, but it has 2 charges. So I can use it right here, and I think it looks kind of cheesy that I like raise my weapon up in the air for Blood Boil, but that is the animation for it. But Blood Boil will still, its cooldown will, I think, be close to where it was on live, if you consider blood runes and when they would come back up. But do know that it has changed in the fact that it actually has a cooldown now, but it has 2 charges and it will no longer cost a rune. So a little bit of a difference there in how they're changing things up. They decided that they did not want Blood Boil costing any runes. They want to save your runes for something more important, which we will get to down the line. Control Undead. This is basically any type of controlling feature in the game. Used to have some type of haste debuff. I believe it was a 30% haste debuff to make sure that whatever you controlled was not too strong for some... I don't know why they did it. That has been removed. So the haste reduction debuff is now gone when controlling Undead. Dancing Rune Weapon. Its parry chance has been increased from 20 to 40%, but its cooldown has been increased from 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes. So this is in line with all of the changes that have gone through that make cooldowns a lot longer. Basically, they want the cooldowns to be longer. And I actually have 2 there, and we'll get to that in the talent tree. It's kind of hard to see, but I actually have 2 there. But basically, Blizzard wanted to basically, as we've seen with the different tanking specs, make your cooldowns longer. Make you really think about when you're using your cooldowns. So yeah, you're going to get 40% parry chance, but at the same time, it's not a 3-minute cooldown, so be careful of it. Death in Decay. Its cooldown has been reduced from 30 seconds to 15 seconds. So this is a bonus in terms of basically being able to get that AoE out there into the world, is having Death and Decay on a 15-second cooldown, which is really nice. And on top of that, your Heart Strike, yes, you heard that right, Heart Strike will hit 3 additional enemies if within your Death and Decay. So the Death and Decay amplifies your, basically your Heart Strike if you are within that Death and Decay. So it's a little bit playing off of the, basically one of the main thematic elements of a holy paladin. I keep saying holy paladin. A protection paladin, about how the light infuses your abilities and makes them stronger and makes your defenses better. Basically, Death and Decay on the ground below you will make your AoE better with Heart Strike, which we'll get to when we get to the new abilities, or I guess you could say returning abilities. So, that is the change for Death and Decay. Probably the biggest one that you want to know is that its cooldown is now 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds. Death Gate's cast time has been reduced from 9 seconds to 4 seconds. Just quick switch there. Makes it quicker to cast Death Gate. Switching up the first letters of those there. Death Grip's cooldown has been reduced from 25 seconds to 15 seconds, which is a great change for Blood Death Knights. They're the only ones that get this nice reduction in the cooldown there. All the other Death Knights still have the 25-second cooldown, but Blood Death Knights now have a 15-second cooldown, which is really nice. And also considering that some of their ability to snare targets has been taken away, it's nice to be able to have this here. For instance, like Chains of Ice, it's nice to be able to have a 15-second cooldown Death Grip at your disposal. Now, I will say one other change for Death Grip is that it increases threat generation by 200% for 3 seconds. Let me pull up the tooltip here so you can actually see it. Basically, the end of the tooltip says increasing threat you generate against that target by 200% for 3 seconds. So if you use Death Grip, the abilities that come right after for the next 3 seconds will be amplified in terms of their threat generation. Death Strike has been changed significantly. This was I went over this in both Unholy and Frost videos because they both have access to this. At least I think Unholy has access to this. Let me double check and make sure. Yes, it does. So they both have access to this, but it's been changed drastically. It used to be just a flat heal. Now it heals you for 20% of all damage taken within the last 5 seconds. I believe that's very similar to Frenzied Regeneration the new Frenzy regeneration for Bear Druids, which I'm pretty sure Bear Druids copied back from Deathstrike. Deathstrikes used to function, I think, somewhat like this, and it's been changed over the years, over the expansions. Now it's back to this. Basically, 20% of all damage taken in the last 5 seconds. It has a minimum of 7% of maximum health. So, you are at least going to heal for 7% of your maximum health every time you use Deathstrike. It could be more, though, if you've taken a lot more damage than you expected in the past. I guess you could say if you took 80% of your health bar in damage, 20% of that will go back to healing you. So you'll get about like a 20% heal, if I did the math correctly on that. A 20% of your health back, something like that. If I did that correctly, I think the math's a little bit off. I think that would be if it was 25%. So it'd be more like 18, 17%, something like that. But still, a pretty big heal that you're going to be able to get out of it. Now, do take note that it does not cost runes anymore, and instead costs runic power. This will be the main item that you're going to be using for runic power. So 45 runic power now, no longer costs any runes, no longer heals for a flat amount, heals for 20% of all damage taken in the past 5 seconds, and it has a minimum of 7% of your maximum health. I believe that is the way it is on the others as well. Let me just take a look real quick just to get an idea, just to make sure. Yes, it is minimum of 7% health. So that ends up being a lot. As a Blood Death Knight, you're sitting here with a 2.3 million health pool, which I think ranks, if I am correct, ranks second amongst all tanks after Bear Druids, which have an immense amount more than you. And then Prot Pallies, I believe, are at the very bottom with the least amount of health. But nonetheless, plenty of health here to get healing out of Deathstrike. Mind Freeze now has a 15-yard range up from melee range, so there's a buff there to Mind Freeze, which is really nice. It locks out spellcasting for 3 seconds down from 4 seconds, so that's kind of something that's been put in there that's baseline, so that all melee are basically only locking out for 3 seconds. That 4 seconds could have come from something else that I didn't notice when looking at my update, but for the most part, just know that it's now a 3-second lockout, and it's a 15-yard range, which is pretty cool. Raise Ally no longer costs any runic power. This is a welcome change. Raise used to be irritating to make sure that you had to save up some runic power in case you needed to revive someone. Yeah, that's not going to be a problem anymore. You just go ahead and raise whenever you want. Vampiric Blood has its cooldown increased from 1 minute to 1.5 minutes, and it increases health and healing. Its increase in health and healing has been increased from 15% to 30%. So before, it would only increase your health and healing by 15%. Now it increases it by 30%. Crimson Scourge. This is the ability that basically allows you to get a reset on your... let's go ahead and pull it up just so we have it here. It's a passive. It's where your auto attacks with your targets affected by your Blood Plague would have a chance to make your Death and Decay, cost no runes, and reset its cooldown. This used to apply to other abilities. Now it only affects Death and Decay now. So just know that it no longer affects those other abilities. It is just Death and Decay. I can't remember the other abilities that affected, but really I don't think this will hurt you too much. Next we have On a Pale Horse. This is the last one. And On a Pale Horse used to reduce the effectiveness of movement impairing effects against you by 30%. That has been taken out, and now On a Pale Horse just gives you the 20% mounted buff. So just take note of that. There's a small change there with On a Pale Horse. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the new abilities so we can round out a Blood Death Knight's kind of ability. We can round out a Blood Death Knight's abilities so we can see just how they're going to function. We know that we're going to be using Deathstrike with our runic power. That'll be our main runic power consumption, but what are we really going to use our runes on? That's what we're going to find out in these new abilities. First off, know that Asphyxiate has been taken off of the talent tree and now is baseline for a Blood Death Knight. I like the Darth Vader grab, so I'm glad to see it there as a baseline. A new ability is called Death's Caress. I do not know what the icon looks like, so I have to open up my my ability book here, my spell book here. So here it is, Death's Caress. Reach out with necrotic tendrils, dealing 33,000 shadow damage and applying your blood plague to the target. A shadowy disease that drains 157 health from the target over 24 seconds. So, blood plague is there. I'm sorry, I did not check to see whether blood plague's duration has changed, because it's just a passive effect, so I didn't check on that. But this is the new ability. It's called Death's Caress, and I have it right here, so we'll go ahead and use it down here. And first off, you can hear some of the new sound effects. I'm going to go ahead and go through abilities that I've already talked about real quick, which is basically, I believe, just Blood Boil, which you can see right there. And then I think the only one that I have not gone through is going to be Death Strike, which I will have to use this a little bit to get enough to use Death Strike, and then here's Death Strike right there. So you can see the new animation for Death Strike and how it works, so it's pretty nice. With that being said, let's take a look at Death's Caress. So we'll go ahead and use it right here. As you can see, I just kind of like shoot out blood. We'll use it from range a little bit. It does have a 30-yard range, so you can attack them with this from afar. See there, I just kind of like shoot out blood out of my fists, and then the target now has blood plague on it. So this can be a way of, this is basically your range of doing some damage. That's why it deals 33 damage right off the bat, so that you can get some instant threat on a target at range, which is what all tanks basically are allowed. They have some type of ability that they can cast at range that deals some damage, that gives some threat. You don't want to be entirely dependent on having Death Grip be your only ability there. And yes, Death and Decay does have a nice range on it, but many times what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have Death and Decay at your feet, and then you'll want to pull with something else instead of pulling with Death and Decay. So that is why they gave that there, so you have a way of kind of AoE threat, or not AoE threat, but range threat generation for you. That is the new ability, Death's Caress. So this is basically taking out your Icy Touch, your Plague Strike. This is the new one. Much better than Plague Strike used to be, so I wouldn't complain. This is definitely a better option. Gorefiend's Grasp is now been also taken out of the talent tree and is now baseline. It is on a 3-minute cooldown now, though, from 1 minute, so a big nerf to its cooldown. I'm not sure how that'll affect basically Blood Death Knights. I think in PvE it won't hurt you too much. In PvP you may not like it as much. Having it on 3-minute cooldown, that's kind of a bummer. I know that other Death Knight specs are kind of bummed out that they can't get Gorefiend's Grasp in their normal spec rotations for Frost and Unholy. It's Blood now, but its cooldown is significant, so I don't think you're missing too much out of that. Heart Strike has been brought back into the game. I believe I was trying to figure out how long it's been since Heart Strike has been removed. I think it was removed either removed at the end of Cataclysm or at the end of Mists of Pandaria. Anyway, either way, it's been gone for at least one expansion now, and so it comes back. And it functions very much the same way. Instantly strike the target and one other nearby enemy, causing physical damage and reducing the enemy's movement speed by 50% for 8 seconds. I cannot remember the old tooltip, but I do not believe it reduced the movement speed of an enemy by 50%, so this is kind of your snare. It's really your only option as a DK in terms of a snare, so you have to be careful of it. Now, it says down here, generates 5 bonus runic power. I don't know what in the blazes that means. What is bonus runic power? So, I'm sitting at 60 right now, and I haven't moved for a little bit, so I'm just going to hold it here. You can see I'm just at 60. I'm going to use this here, and I believe it goes up 15. It does. So I'm going to guess that the tooltip is messed up and that it actually generates 10 runic power, and then somewhere, somehow, it gets an extra 5 bonus runic power. It's just a tooltip error. I'm not sure why it does that, but basically, Heart Strike is going to be your main method of actually, you get your blood plague on your target. It's going to be your main method of actually getting your actual runic power is going to be through Heart Strike. So glad to see it back. It really fits now with the spec. They could have brought back Blood Strike, but I think everyone's forgotten about that by now. So Heart Strike is back, and it is available for Blood Death Knights, and it is a core part of your rotation. Which brings us to the next ability, which is what you're going to be really spending your runes on. While you will be spending your runes on Heart Strike to make sure that you have enough runic power to spam Death Strike, you are going to be using your runes on Morrowind. It costs 2 runes. Smash the target, dealing 174,000 physical damage and generating 3 charges of Bone Shield. Bone Shield surrounds you with a barrier of whirling bones, reducing damage you take by 20%. So that's part still the same. And then increasing your haste by 10%. That part is a buff. Each damaging attack consumes a charge, lasts 30 seconds, or until all charges are consumed. So we will go ahead and use it on this target right here. You have to be in melee range for this. So you can't just pop on, you know, your Bone Shield or your Morrowind. And, you know, be done with it. This actually does damage and gives you a shield, so that's pretty cool. So there we go, the damage and the shield. And I will sit here and I'll beat on this target. And, you know, I can use my runes for this, or I can use it for Death Strike to get some, or I can use it on Morrowind to get shields. I'm not sure how high your shields can stack. We can test it right here. 9 shields, 10 shields. 10 shields is the max. So if you're sitting at 7, or I should say 8 or above, you don't want to waste your runes on Morrowind because you won't get any more stacks in that. You get 10 stacks. Your haste does not increase by multiplying amounts depending on the stacks. It just means you have more stacks for them to break down your Bone Shield. So, basically, let's put this in a nutshell. I know there are a couple of abilities I still have to go over with a Blood DK, but your rotation and how you're going to tank as a Blood DK is now set in stone. I will even test it on the tank dummy, which scares me to death, you guys know of. Basically, you will be using Heart Strike to generate your actual damage. You will be using Heart Strike to deal damage and to generate runic power. You will be using your Death Strike to heal yourself, and then you will be using your Morrowind. Oh my gosh, that ability is going to annoy the crud out of me. To mitigate damage through your Bone Shield. Okay? So, the defensive measures of a Blood Death Knight are all about these magical shields. The Bone Shield. Your Mastery Blood Shield is still intact. If you've forgotten what it is, Mastery Blood Shield, each time you heal yourself with Death Strike, you gain 29% of the base amount healed as a physical damage absorption shield. So, everything is around that physical damage absorption and the shield from your Bone Shield. It's all magical shielding. That is the story and the thematic element of a Blood Death Knight. Now, I'm not sure where a Blood Death Knight stands compared to a Guardian Druid and all the other tanks in terms of whether they're better against magical or physical damage. That's going to be kind of up to, you know, I think the theory crafters are going to have to figure out which one's better at each. I think if you're looking for a good mid-range, the Guardian Druid I think is going to end up being the absolute middle ground for just about everything. And then the specs will go either more AoE heavy or more single target heavy, and then they'll go either more magical defense oriented or more physical defense oriented based off of that Bear Druid center. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and look at the last 2 abilities in review real quick before I head into it. Heart Strike, you generate you burn runes and you generate your runic power. Death Strike you use to heal yourself, and then Morrowind you use to get yourself defensive shields up. So, you will basically use your runes and runic power around those 3 abilities for defensive mitigation as a Blood Death Knight. And while it seems so simple, that you're basically just kind of working around 3 different abilities. You gotta imagine, Bone Shield is mitigating magical damage and increasing your haste, whereas something like Death Strike is healing you back your health, but it only gives you a physical absorption shield through the mastery, as opposed to a magical absorption shield. So you really, as a Death Knight, are going to have to sit there and think, you know, which one do I need at this time and place? Do I want more runic power so I can get more death strikes, or do I want more basically, do I want to use Morrowind more so I have more defensive measures? It's going to be up to you to decide. So, with that, let's look at the last two abilities. First is Wraithwalk. This is basically Reaper from Overwatch. It is now in World of Warcraft. We'll go ahead and use Wraithwalk. Sidestep into the Shadowlands, breaking root effects and increasing your movement speed by 70% for 4.5 seconds. During this time, all movement and pairing effects are suppressed, but any action will cancel the effect. So, pretty nice ability that all Death Knights have now received. It's pretty cool. I think really the WoW developers were like, hey, we really like this ability with Reaper, let's give it to Death Knights, and that's how it came to be an ability, because it doesn't necessarily fill any gaps or anything. It's just kind of like, this would be cool in World of Warcraft, and that's how it came there. That's kind of how I feel about it. The last, I mentioned that I would talk about this at the very end, is Veteran of the Third War. Basically, the passive has just been gutted completely. It increases your stamina by 50% and your armor by 15%. So this is part of the reason why Blood DKs are the second highest health pool in the game, is probably because of Veteran of the Third War. The only way I believe health pools can get higher than this, Bear Druids have a baseline, and then Protection Warriors, I think, have a talent that they can take that can really increase their health pool. But for the most part, you are second to the top in terms of your health pool in amongst all of the tanks in Legion, to my knowledge. With that being said, we have gone through all of the abilities for a Blood Death Knight, which means that we are now able to go through the talent tree for the artifact weapon for a Blood Death Knight. First, let's look at the artifact weapon's ability. It's called Consumption. Strikes all enemies in front of you with a hungering attack that deals 201,000 physical damage and heals you for 100% of that damage. So you have more damage into healing, basically, as a Blood Death Knight, which is kind of playing into the theme of what Death Strike does. So that's pretty cool. Your magical shielding, and your damage through healing, or your healing through damage. That is the Blood Death Knight way. So we'll go right here, right there. Massive cleave and a lot of healing there. You see how much I healed basically with that ability. I healed for, it looks like approximately with those three targets, I healed for around 600,000 damage. So that's what, basically a 1/4 of my health pool. That's a lot. So that's pretty good damage, not damage mitigation, but it's a good way to get your health pool back. Is through consumption. It's only a 45-second cooldown, so that's actually pretty cool. With that, let's go ahead and look at the artifact tree. So here it is. It's called Maw of the Damned. That is your artifact weapon. You start right here with consumption, and then from there you will spread out and get to all these talents. The first talent we have here is Sanguinary Affinity. Increases physical damage done by 8%. On the left, we have Dance of Darkness. Increases the duration of your Dancing Rune weapon by 6 seconds. 3 ranks, that'll be 2 seconds per rank. So your Dancing Rune weapon now lasts 14 seconds as opposed to the live version of 8 seconds. Vampiric Fangs increases the maximum hit points granted by Vampiric Blood by an additional 15% and increases healing received by an additional 15%. So while it's already been buffed by 15% compared to the live version, this buffs it another 15%. So your total buffage, so to say, on Vampiric Blood is going to be 45% increased health and 45% increased healing. We'll go ahead and use this here so you can see. I have now 3.3 million health, which is a lot. Going down the line, we have Mouth of Hell. Dancing Rune weapon summons a second copy of Maw of the Damned. While Dancing Rune weapon is active, your Morrowind spell will generate an additional charge of Bone Shield. So that is really nice. If you guys didn't know or weren't paying attention, basically your Morrowind will generate 3 shields. So if I use this and then I use Morrowind, I will be generating 4 stacks instead of just 2. Actually, I generated like 10 there instantaneously, which is insane. So it generates stacks very quickly when you have Dancing Rune weapon. I'm not sure if each Dancing Rune weapon will generate an additional charge or if it's bugged at the moment. But right now, it should be 4 charges of Bone Shield being created from Mouth of Hell while Dancing Rune weapon is active. On the right hand side here, we have Rattling Bones. Morrowind has a 30% chance to generate an additional charge of bone shield, so it could have been also from that. So we could have got extra on charges of bone shield. So as you can see in this tree so far, it's all playing into the magical shield effect ability of a Blood Death Knight, the thematic element of a blood shield, of having magical shielding. Iron Heart increases your armor by 6%. That'll be 2% per rank for 3 ranks. We have Blood Feast. Heart Strike heals you for 25% of the damage it deals. That plays right into what Death Strike does. So you're basically more healing into damage into healing on a Blood Death Knight. Here we have Bone Breaker. Increases the damage done by Mara Rend by 24%. That's 3 ranks, 8% per rank. We have All-Consuming Rot. Increases the damage done by Death and Decay by 24%. Once again, 3 ranks, 8% per rank. And then our first epic portrait down here is Unending Thirst. While Blood Shield is active, so as long as you've done a death strike with, how much time do we have on it? It does not say. I'm not sure how long your shields actually last. But so long as your blood shield is active, you gain 50% leech, and damage dealt by death strike is increased by 50%. So basically, you want to have your shield up as much as possible. And that is basically where you're going to want that. It looks like it's 10 seconds on the blood shield. So as long as you're keeping your death strike up, you can keep that shield up, which means that you will get 50% leech, and your death strike is increased by 50%. So just make sure that you have your shield up and you'll be in good shape. Basically this plays in more to the fact that you do more damage, the more, basically the more health that you will receive back, the more leech. That's the Blood Death Knight way. On the left hand side here we have Meat Shield. Increases your stamina by 3%, 3 ranks, that'll be 1% per rank. Down at the bottom we have a Vein Render. Increases the damage done by Heart Strike by 24%. That is a gruesome title for a talent, Vein Render. So that'll be 3 ranks, that'll be 8% per rank for Heart Strike. I'm kind of surprised that there's such big bonuses to damage in this talent tree. For all the other ones it's been like 10% or so, but this one for some reason it seems like you really are going to have to you're really going to have to level up your Blood Death Knight's artifact weapon to get stuff online faster. The last epic portrait over here, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. It's Umbilicus Eternus. After vampiric blood expires, you absorb damage equal to 5 times the damage your blood plague dealt during vampiric blood. So let's go ahead and use vampiric blood, and then we will see how this works out. So we'll go ahead and just put blood plague on each one of these, and then we'll see what happens at the end of it. You can see it right here, absorbing damage dealt by blood plague. As you can see right there, absorbs the next, wow, it's a lot. 1.2 million damage. I'm making sure, I'm like counting like decimal places over, make sure I got that right. That is a huge absorption shield. So, vampiric blood, 1.5 minute cooldown now, but that is it. If you have blood plague on a lot of target, if you spread it out to a lot of targets, we're talking about a lot, a ton of absorption that you will get at the end of vampiric blood. So if you time vampiric blood just right, you can mitigate a lot of damage as a blood decay. Over on the right hand side we have Grim Perseverance. Increases your parry chance by 3%, 3 ranks, that'll be 1% per rank. Down at the bottom we have, oh my gosh, another word, jeez, coagulopathy. Oh my gosh, I don't know if that's right. Increases the damage done by blood plague by 24%. That'll be 8% per rank for 3 ranks. The doctors out there in the world will have to tell me how that's pronounced because that's insane. Coagulopathy. That's insane. The last ability here is going to be Skeletal Shattering. Each time Bone Shield absorbs damage as a chance equal to your critical strike chance to absorb an additional 8% of the damage. So it gives some more option for critical strike to be an option for Blood Death Knights come World of Warcraft Legion. And it also plays into, just like the others, basically all about absorption, magical absorption shields, and leeching. That is your Blood Death Knight way. So, that is everything with Blood Death Knights in World of Warcraft Legion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. In the next video, we will look at the PvE and PvP talents for a Blood Death Knight, and then that will be the absolute final video in this class overview series. From Arcris, this is Tearless, and I will see you guys later. Tearless out.